Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Back.
Hello.
Welcome, infinite beings, back to the infinite me, where we're talking about everything about living infinitely and embodying that and playing with it all so that we can live the most amazing life that we can. So I'm Mandy, and over there is Nat. And Nat. Yesterday we talked about how do you feel infinite? What things do you partake in, what activities, sometimes it's music, sometimes it's actually an activity that we do, an experience that we have that lets us access that feeling of limitlessness and that infinite space that we've been talking about. So we talked all about that, the different activities that we can do to get ourselves into that space as well, so that we get to know that space and embody that a lot more, so that becomes our natural way of being. So that was all about yesterday.
Yep.
So today we're going to do our infinite lucky dip that we talked about yesterday for the topic. So I'm still going to have to write a lot more in there, but I've got a few. You can't really see it. Got a few in there for today.
Oh, I didn't even know what's in there. So
no, Nat doesn't know either.
At least you have an idea of what's possible.
That's true. Not that I really thought about them. I just wrote them. But okay, so we'll do a pick. We'll see what our topic is for today.
All right. You're a bit frozen on the screen, which is really weird. Look on your face. Okay, you're good now.
Is that right? Okay, yeah. Got a green one.
Here we go. Green's the day.
Okay, so talking about consciously creating versus by default.
Oh, that's hilarious. I was talking to somebody about this last night. He's probably actually watching it right now, Sharon.
This one's for you, Sharon.
This one's for you, Sharon.
Okay, consciously creating versus by default.
Very cool. Cool topic. Off? Yes. Yeah.
What you're chatting about.
The point I was making actually to Sharon last night was that in every moment, because we are infinite beings, we are always creating every single moment of the day. You're creating something. In fact, you're creating your reality. So what I was saying to her and explaining was that you're either going to create by default, which I guess means by your belief systems and your patterns and your subconscious, basically. Yes. So which, people sort of say scientifically runs 95% of everything. Everything runs on default, and you think that you're being all creative, but you're really not, or consciously creating. And I guess that's, that lifestyle by design, and people do get into this sort of thing. There's the vision board idea and a lot of these sorts of things that people are actually wanting to set intentions and consciously create. So that does dive into that realm of consciously creating your reality. So you're either doing one or the other. So it's sort of like the more aware you become, particularly of the infinite and your ability to actually create every moment, then you're going to step more into the conscious creation. But the whole point is you're always creating.
Creating, yeah, true. Yep.
One way or another.
Yes. There's never, we might think we get stuck, but in reality we can never ever be stuck. It's always creation's always moving and changing and shifting all the time. So there's that thing that you say, even if you get stuck, say, on a decision and you say, I can't decide, you're still making a choice by not deciding. So there is that thing that you're always sort of, as you said, like making a choice and creating. You just might not be doing it in the way that you would really like to be doing it. So that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So definitely. Yeah. So I think there is that thing, is there, about moving into the creating more from that inner space that we've been talking about, the infinite consciousness, that we can tap into that space when we tap into the very true feeling that's moving through us, that feels like a true thing we want to create in our life, and then listening for the prompts, if you like, the intuition that comes through to move on that and flow that out into the world, versus listening to the ego monkey mind about creating wants to come out, as you said, by default. Then it does feel like we're at the mercy, if you like, of life and circumstances, and we feel like we don't have a choice sometimes when we're in that space, and it does feel like it's just happening to us and we can't actually change our reality or affect what's happening outside us, or you might feel like we are trying to change it and that's not working. That's usually probably the space we fall into as well, is that it's like, why can't my life change? Why am I in this pattern again? Why can't I shift what's going on?
Yeah, I guess there's a few points in there with what you just said. It's I guess having the reptilian brain, like you may have actually heard about that in consciousness talk, which is that survival mechanism. We all have it. It sits at the base of the brain here, and we still have it. So what's happened with the brain is that we all started with the reptilian brain because that's where we came from, and then the brain layered on top of each other as we grew to human beings. I guess we went, yes, we evolved. Yes, that's the right word. Not as we grew. But we still all have at the base of our brain there the reptilian brain, which is that survival mechanism. It's the instincts that we all have to survive. So you'll often hear, if you really listen out for it, people actually use that term quite a bit.
Yes.
Where somebody is really in survival mode, and we can be in survival mode, not just for food and shelter, but when we're haven't got enough money and the basics of life type thing that we determine as human beings that are really necessary in life. Money is definitely one of those things. Relationships can be definitely deemed as that.
Yes.
A job, even those sorts of things in our modern society have become deemed as survival needs. And when you don't have those things, then you are really quick to react to stuff. So that's what the reptilian brain did. It was like cause and effect, like bang, 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 all the time sort of thing. So you're constantly reacting to everything around you. And I guess in that case, we are talking about creating by default. The brain knows how to survive and keep the body alive. And so that's what you end up doing.
Yes.
Just this constant reaction thing. So you almost feel totally out of control, that you're just bouncing from one thing to the next, and we've probably all met people like that or heard about them even on Facebook, where it just seems like you're always bouncing from one issue to the next. Even maybe watching some reality shows seem to be like that, some of the characters on there. And it just never seems to end. And it's sort of like you're always just dealing with issues. And it's like, wow, where's the creation process sort of thing? Like you just are literally so caught up in that cycle that you can't get out of it. And you're so far in the story. Thinking about some of the reality shows that we've watched, very briefly watched. Some of those like housewife type shows and stuff like that, Housewives of XYZ.
America or whatever.
So many of them now. Even one from Melbourne.
Yes.
Some of those, like I have watched some of those, and it's like, oh my God, all you're doing is just talking about everybody else, worried about everybody else's life, dealing with your own shit. Like it just is like crazy stuff. And it's like, really? You really want to create a life like that? That's nuts.
Yes.
So that to me, and I could be very wrong, but that to me seems very reactive, very reptilian, very creating by default. It's all you know is how to argue with people and gossip about people and all those sorts of things. And it's easy to get caught up in. And just watching the news and having access to the outside world type thing, it's so easy to get sucked into that these days and drift straight back into that default mechanism of filling up your life. I wouldn't even say creating your life, filling up your life with so much crap. Rather than having space to be artistic and space to create a project and really do what you love in the world, sort of thing, like stuff that really brings you joy.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's like what I was just saying earlier, you're choosing regardless of whether you think you're making a decision or not. Like you're choosing by default, just by what Nat is saying, by putting it. To me, it kind of feels like it's where you put your focus is where you're creating. So if your focus is constantly outside of yourself, like what Nat was just sharing, all those things that take up our time and attention, the media, what your neighbour's doing, what so-and-so on Instagram has just posted, what's happening at your work, like the gossip about what's going on at work, what hairstyle you should get and you can't decide that, whatever's just, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be little things or big things, but just wherever your focus is, anytime it's outside of yourself, you're very limited with what you can create. Like you're not playing with the potential of everything that exists, because you have to know yourself as the one to have that access to that infinite creativity flowing through you. So when your focus is outside of you, then you're seeing yourself as separate. And everyone's probably had that experience when you're in a really shitty place, if you like you've just got so much stuff happening, and it does feel like there's one thing after the other, and you notice that your mind is just running on overdrive. You do feel very separate. You feel very small in relation to the rest of the universe, and that you're on your own. And you have to sort it out. Like, it's up to you to work it out. You can't sort of rely on the universe or God or whatever your normal source that you would tap into. You do feel like it's up to you to work out the problems, and that's when that survival mode, as you said, is kicking in. And it is an instinctual thing too. We do have that part of us that kicks in because it feels like it's survival is at risk, which is probably not true. Like, we're not being chased by a lion, or we're not about to lose our life, but it can feel like that to the ego, like and that's exactly what it is. It's only the ego that's feeling threatened. The ego's life is feeling threatened, so that's why we feel so out of control, if you like, and have to try and have to, I was gonna say, like, paddle upstream, if you like we're going against the flow a lot of the time, trying to fix or change or improve the situation outside of us, versus this consciously creating, which is that tapping into the infinite space and slowing ourselves right down, becoming present, slowing our breath down, whatever you need to do to stop the mind chatter and get into your body and feel what's actually coming through your body. And know that everything is okay. It doesn't matter what's happening on the outside. It is just a story at the end of the day. And the more we can pull ourselves out of that and know ourselves as the actual writer of the story, rather than the little character in it, then we can actually start to create from that space. And that takes some time and focus. Like, it isn't an overnight thing, as we've talked about before. You do have to do that as a practice, about drawing your energy in out of the creations you have outside of you, out of the illusions outside of you, slowing down your mind, not listening to the ego, paying more attention to the intuitive voice that's coming through you, doing whatever you need to do to be present, whether that's meditation or spending time in nature or reading a book instead of checking your emails in the morning, like whatever you need to do to keep bringing yourself back into that space. Then you do actually have a chance, if you like, about creating consciously. It's very hard without doing those things, I find anyway. So
I think the other flip side of that is like looking at the conscious creation stuff as well. And I don't know about you, man, but I've certainly gone backwards and forwards about this for so many years. About, I guess it comes from personal development. It comes from a lot of the courses and bits and pieces that people put out, the whole positive thinking movement, and particularly personal development, where they're talking about setting goals and intentions. And it's sort of, where does that sit in the grand scheme of things, when I also know that my infinite self already knows me better than I would ever know myself in human form. And it knows what I would love much greater than what my human self would ever know. Because when you think about it, like, your human self can only ever imagine what's already possible, like what's already in creation now in the human, in reality. And we're pushing the boundaries on those things all the time. The 4-minute mile idea, where the 4-minute mile wasn't possible until Roger Bannister did it, and then suddenly, bang, all these people could do it. And it's like, why? It's like suddenly because it became possible for the human form to actually do that. So we are pushing the boundaries. We Elon Musk. I was just watching a documentary on Elon Musk. So I always get his name wrong. Elon Musk. I was watching a documentary about him on the way here, actually, and how he's really pushing the boundaries on going to Mars right now, and creating the rockets that have to come back down to Earth and land vertically again so that they can reuse them. Otherwise, it's financially not viable, like all this stuff. So we're really pushing the boundaries now on so many things. Science is pushing the boundaries on stuff. So that's expanding what's possible. And so you could then start to have intentions of those crazy things, like, oh, I have an intention of going to Mars in my lifetime. But you're still limited. It's still always going to be limited when you set and write down your goals and your intentions about what you think is actually possible. For yourself. Not only possible for the human race to start off with, which is a limitation in itself, but also then you've got your own set of default programs and belief systems that say, I could make $1 million next week, but I couldn't make $10 million. That's like, so suddenly $10 million is not possible for you. Or I could make $100 this week, but I couldn't make $1,000. That seems way too much for me and my ability to do that. So suddenly you can't do it. Like, it's not going to be possible to do that. So setting intentions and setting goals and stuff like that, I really have struggled with over the years, and I've beaten myself up about struggling with those things because I've seen people use them and I've seen them have amazing lifestyles from that. So it's this constant backwards and forwards. It's like, should I be doing that? Shouldn't I be doing that? But then I think the more I've done this work, and even just us talking about this stuff now, I've really let go of all that stuff. It's like, I'm just not interested in setting goals and intentions. Because I see the limitation of it now.
Yes.
I see what it can do. Whereas now I prefer to just be in the flow and allowing the infinite to actually show me, well, to turn up in reality, I guess, the different things that are possible, because I could never have imagined some of the stuff that had come up before. And it's like, oh my God, like, oh, I could never have even imagined that, let alone tried to create it. Like, my little human life. I'm like, that's amazing. Like, just the coincidences that happen, and opportunities that come, and the people you meet, and the money that does flow in, or the great relationships, or whatever, like the contacts you make, just different stuff that happens in your day-to-day world when you really let go of feeling like you have to be in control of that process of the conscious creation. So to me, the conscious creation isn't actually being in control of the conscious creation. It's actually allowing the infinite stuff to flow through and just play when it comes. That's like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, I'm so enjoying this right now.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's a few things with what you just said in terms of having a goal outside of yourself, which is fine. It's not to say you can't ever have a goal. It's more about, you got to be really honest with yourself about if that's actually true for you too, because a lot of the time we get caught up in and it's very easy to do just in the world we live in, you know, like to get caught up in what we think we should be creating sometimes, and some of that may be partly true as well, but the ego can get a hold sometimes, you know, of those things as well. So that's just having that conscious awareness all the time and really tuning in to yourself and knowing if something is true for you, and course correcting when you feel like you're going off track, you know. So so you can still have an idea of a goal, but not being attached to the form, like what Nat is talking about. It's not getting attached to how that's going to show up, because as you were just saying, the universe is going to provide you something way more creative and imaginative than you would ever come up with, even if you tried to piece that together. So I'm just thinking, I had that thing that happened to me yesterday, I was sharing with you yesterday, whereas it's not really something I created. I'm not saying it's a goal I had out there, but I'm up visiting my parents at the moment, so I'm interstate to where I normally live. And we were out for lunch with my sister-in-law and my niece. And so I was up at the counter just ordering a coffee. And next thing, got sort of tapped on the shoulder by someone. And it turns out it was an old school friend, a man that I used to go to primary school with. And so did my husband, Andrew. We all went to the same school. And he happened to be, he normally lives in Sydney. So he lives at a different state as well to where we were. So he was interstate as well. So we both come from completely different places. We're in the same state. He's up for work for one day, and he he just basically Googled a coffee shop while he was in the car to work out somewhere to go for lunch, and happened to choose that particular coffee shop that we were in as well at that exact time. Like, he was only there for 20 minutes. But that's just that random things that can happen that just sort of, to me, it's just like those infinite reminders that we've spoken about, that the universe is just kind of showing you like all the cool stuff that can kind of show up. Yeah, like that. I wouldn't have even, that's just so random, but it's just like, wow, what is the chances of that happening? Like, it's just pretty amazing when you start looking at that kind of stuff. So to me, that just sort of feels like the more I stay in that infinite space, you get those really playful kind of things to show up to play with. Like, so it's not like a conscious creation where I put it out there to suddenly bump into Guy from school, but it was just like a kind of a fun thing to play with, if you like. It's like, oh wow, look at that, that's really random and fun and creative that happened at that exact time. So, and it is
always fun, isn't it? Like, no matter how many times that happens to you, it's always an element of like, holy crap, that's so cool. Like,
I had that all better
with that.
that or better that we've talked about that. I think we've talked about this before. One of my mentors, Jennifer Hoff, had talked about this idea of vision board. So if you're going to do a vision board, there's nothing, wrong with doing a vision board. You can still put some things on there that feel true for you, and maybe they're not physical things. They could actually be just like attributes, like you might want to feel more free, or you might want to feel more playful, or whatever like that. But yeah, so it's just a matter of what you're going to put on there in terms of, she talked a lot about this, putting the let's hang on with me.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's sort of like, there definitely is no problem in having a dream board. I didn't mean that when I said about not having intentions. You have to feel what's true for you at the end of the day, and this goes for anything we're talking about on the Infinite Me. Oh, look at that sunset. That's beautiful. Yeah, you have to feel in for what's true for you. Over the years, I have had intentions and stuff like that, but I have started to, the more I've jumped into this, the more I felt like it hasn't been true for me to have those things. So if dream boards are still working for you and you still feel really drawn to putting up some pictures of different things that you want, or as Mandy was saying, like words and attributes, then absolutely 100% do that, because that is true for you. I guess all we're saying is make sure it is true for you, that you're not just dipping into somebody else's dream or what you think it should look like, because of the outside world saying, oh, you should have a big house and a really cool car, and you should have this. It may not be true for you. Neither of us have a house, and we're perfectly happy not having a house and moving around the world. Like, that's our dream lifestyle.
But for some people that might be,
that's right. So it's sort of like, what is it for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I was just thinking with that idea of the vision board was she used to say, Jennifer Hoff, about leaving the bottom half of it completely blank and just writing or better. So it's kind of leaving it up to the universe to deliver these like really imaginative, creative kind of, solutions to how you get the things that you really truly want. As you said, like the universe has, when you say the universe, it's like our higher levels, our infinite consciousness, if you like. So the part that when we do feel ourselves as that, then it's what feels true and aligned is what's going to show up in those imaginative, creative ways, like we've just talked about. So, but as our little, human limited self, we often don't know. Like, we think we have an idea, but it's still very limited with what we can access as what we think is actually possible. Yeah. So,
I guess an example of that is what
focus on the sun. I was going to see if it will focus on the sunset, but I don't know if it's going to.
We were just looking at it just before as we moved. I said, look.
Yeah, it's not really picking it up.
Oh, there, now got it.
A little bit, yeah.
Right there.
Yes.
Beautiful.
It's over the water.
Over the mountains on the back.
Got it.
Gold Coast, Queensland.
Yes.
Very
nice.
Yes. Yeah, just thinking of that story I had the other day, very briefly. Whereas, like, for a long time, I felt like I wanted to travel, but what was coming to me is I wanted to have holiday homes all over the world, and then suddenly, years and years later, I'm house sitting, and it's like, oh my god, I've actually got holiday homes virtually all over the world, but I'm not even paying for them.
Yes,
I would never have imagined that.
Maintain them. Yep.
I get cars and all sorts of things. I didn't even own any of it. It's like that whole sense of stewardship, like. And I guess that's something we could dive into at some stage as well, is like, you don't have to own everything. You can just be a steward of it and use it. Because at the end of the day, all you want is the experience of using that thing. You don't necessarily want the feeling of owning it. And at the end of the day, who owns anything? Because it's all owned by the infinite. So we don't actually own anything anyway. That's a fallacy. Yes. So it's like you have this sense of stewardship. And this can be in anything. It doesn't have to be, just house sitting and traveling the world. That sense of using things in your space, whatever comes in for you. And so it's almost like being a steward of something rather than owning it. You actually take more care of it, and you actually I feel you appreciate it more.
Yes.
So that could probably be a whole other topic to talk about. But it just reminded me of that, in terms of, I could never have guessed years and years ago in my limited self when I was at uni that this is how it would show up.
Yes.
And so much better than so much more freeing, not having to own stuff, and just being the steward of it and using it and floating around wherever I feel like to live that month or the next month, and not having to to worry about the ownership of it. So
Yes.
it's sort of quite interesting. It's always going to be a lot freer when you allow the infinite to actually create for you,
Yes.
and to bring it into reality than probably what you will have created as well. So not only will it be more expansive, but it'll probably be a lot freer in its responsibility.
Yes. True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about the idea too that as we've spoken about before in previous episodes, we've been talking a lot about inner space and that concept of creating more inner space, which is what you are effectively doing when you come to know yourself more as that infinite feeling that's moving through you rather than this, physical, human, finite body, and being in the 3D world. So the more we create that space, that sense of space, there is more space for this infinite potential to flow through us and for us to act on that as well. And also the other thing that seems to happen that I've noticed too, and I think Nat has as well, and probably many people that have been on the consciousness journey for a while, is that the more inner space you create, the less you actually want anything. Like you already know that you have it. So it's, yes, you get to still experience it in the outside world. So it's not saying you don't ever get to then have a nice house or have nice holidays or anything like that, but you don't need them anymore. It's not coming from an ego space of, I need to do this thing because I need to escape my job, or I need to have a big house because then I fit in and my family accepts me more, or, whatever those stories are that we, a lot of the time unconsciously have running. But the more space that you cultivate inside you and know that feeling, you just want for less things. So yes, you could still choose to interact and you get to probably enjoy them a lot more because it's not coming from that need space anymore. You know it as yourself. So then the other thing that comes out of that too is that the more space you have, the more when Nat was talking about that idea of I could create $100 this week, but I couldn't create $1,000 this week, or I could create 100,000, but I couldn't create 200,000. So the more space that you have, the more possible all those things feel. So this inner space that we talk about, all those things suddenly feel possible. So your world kind of opens up in terms of what you have access to and what you all of a sudden now feel guided to do sometimes as well. You suddenly feel capable of doing those things, or you get a download of an idea which suddenly gives you this access to, oh wow, I could create this path and it's going to create an income of $200,000, which when you're in this little limited space and your mind's just kind of ticking over all the time, you didn't have access to that idea before, or that push to come through, or that contact that you just met, because you weren't open to it as well. So there is a whole aspect around this inner space too that's definitely lined up with the conscious creating, whereas the by default feels like it's outside of us. It feels like that little infinite self trying to make not infinite, little finite self trying to make things happen. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and even setting the intentions, I guess, by putting a figure on it, going, oh, I want to make $100,000 this year. It's like, well, guess how much you're going to make this year?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
There won't be any more than that, because you've already told the universe, your infinite self what you want.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, cool. If that's what you want, there you go.
Yes.
If you believe it, like I guess it's not just about putting that up on your dream board and it'll suddenly turn up. We've talked about that.
But you might only ever have made $40,000, say, in a job that you had, and that's always been your like
benchmark,
upper limit, if you like you've never gone beyond that. So that's all you think is kind of possible. So it's almost like then you might even see another job advertised for $60,000, and you might actually be quite capable of doing it, but you probably will tell yourself, I can't go for that job, because you don't have that experience or understanding of yourself of what it would take to embody a $60,000 a year job, say, for example. So there is that as well too, like what you're actually become used to and the limits that you do put on yourself around that as well. So the more space you're creating around that and feeling into the uncomfortable space that might bring up for you, like, oh, I'm really feeling I can't earn more this, and I'm feeling a bit, maybe my self-worth is a bit low. And the more you let those feelings just come up and be and not judge them, they'll start to move through you and you'll create more space. And then suddenly 60,000 doesn't seem like such a big leap, or whatever, the figure is, or the goal that you're going for. It doesn't really matter. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There you go. I think, I think it's important to keep in mind that you're always creating.
Exactly. Yep.
So you're either going to create from your old patterns, and if you've got stuff repeating over and over again, stories repeating, or
Yes.
stories from other people repeating, so people in your space. So I guess my understanding has always been the more conscious you become, those stories and repeating patterns used to be in your life, and then they start to get a little bit wider and they start to show up in other people's lives.
Yes.
And then suddenly they start to dissipate out of those people's lives as well, and you don't hear about them anymore. So that's sort of, it's this feeling of expansion, I guess, is that, okay, you're no longer holding those patterns necessarily, but there's still dregs of it there, and you'll start to see it in other people.
Yes.
And then that starts to dissipate as well. So I don't know if that's your own feeling, man, but that's always been my thing. Same with health. You'll be the one with the health issues, and then you'll find that as you awaken more and you become more healthy as such, because you're tapping more into your truth, then those sorts of things can start showing up in other people around you, and it's whether you get affected by those things or not. And then suddenly health isn't really in your space anymore. You don't have an issue with health anymore, health issues.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, I think, this idea we've spoken about too, about taking your power out of those stories that we have running. So whether it is in health or finances or relationships, which is usually the three big ones as we've spoken about. So if you do have something health related come up, often it's because you do still have a lot of power invested in the limitations, if you like, of the human body, or around suffering or around pain, or it's going to be very individual what that story is about for you too. There's no blanket kind of answer to that. So we do have some very good guides, things like Louise Hay that wrote You Can Heal Your Life. You can heal your life, or you can heal your body. I think it's either or.
Heal your life, actually.
I think that's Heal Your Life. But which was really like groundbreaking for like 30 years ago, or whenever that book was actually written. It was around a particular health complaint, so that would come up, or a symptom, and you could look that up. So, okay, my left ear is hurting, or I've got a broken ankle, and you could actually look up these specific symptoms to see what the sort of metaphysical reason was for those. So on an emotional level, maybe the thought patterns you had running, or a limited story, say, if you like. But as we sort of grow in consciousness too, it can't be so fixed anymore, if you like. Like it's very individual. Like, and you do have to kind of feel into these things for yourself about what is this thing showing for me? Do I still have some power running in this? Because it's only the ego that's going to judge us having something wrong with us. Like at the end of the day, we make it mean something about ourselves. So if we're judging all that, then it does feel like a shitty thing is happening to us from the outside. But what if this was all coming from an infinite space and it was in our story for a reason? Like, what is that all that about? You know, so we can play with any story that shows up, health, finances, or relationships. There's always an opportunity to take our power back out of those stories when they do show up, or if they show up outside of you, as Nat was saying. It is around, I feel sometimes too, about seeing those things that you might still be triggered by, so you still again get an opportunity to take your power back out of those things, or you get to experience that freedom of maybe having moved through that illusion for yourself. You can sort of, you get given almost like evidence that doesn't affect you anymore. Like, oh wow, look at this space I've created around this. I don't buy into that judgment anymore, or that illusion, or so you get that evidence to kind of cement, if you like your inner space more and more, that feeling, that infinite feeling that's coming through you as well.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. Just had Jasmine show up. Hello, ladies.
Hello, Jasmine.
Now.
In New Zealand.
Oh, very cool.
Yes.
Nice to have you here.
Only just joining you now. Sounds interesting and definitely going to replay.
Very cool. Yeah, it was a good one today. We had some cool stuff. Awesome. All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll see what the lucky dip shows us tomorrow. About what we're going to talk about. That's one down out of the lucky dip. You better start filling up your bag.
Throw a few more topics in there. Yes.
I know. I have to start. All these topics start firing. I have to send them through to you.
Yes. And like we said yesterday, if there's any particular topics that you would like to see talked about as well, perhaps, that's another thing that you could let us know in the comments, if there's anything to do with living an infinite life that you've thought about, or it's kind of crossed your mind, you have a question around. Definitely, if you're stuck on something too, we'd love to hear. Maybe we can throw that into our infinite lucky dip, and it might get drawn out to chat about. So
At the perfect moment.
Bit of fun.
Very cool. This is fun.
Yeah.
It's actually cool, like not knowing. I was actually excited
It is
about it.
actually.
It's actually more exciting than knowing about, like
Yes.
talking about it and thinking, oh, we should do this, we should do that. No, let's not do that. Let's do something else.
So even for me, I'm just going to write the topics out very quickly and not think about them. So just so I'm not even kind of consciously, preparing something to talk about when that comes up either. I want to be just as in the moment as Nat is on the topic. So yeah, see where we go.
Love it. Oh, that's fun. Very cool. Truly infinite.
Yes.
All right. We'll leave it there and we'll catch you all again tomorrow.
Yes. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. All righty.
Bye.
Play in the infinite lucky dip now.